So this is the first of the education series, and we have another one coming up next month, which is session number 2 on retainers, trusts, and bills. So hopefully you all come back for the future sessions in this series, because we're doing a whole roadmap on opening an office. We also have coming up on Wednesday, January 22nd, let's meet for coffee at the coffee shop. On January 25th, there's a Lafayette Reservoir Walk for members of the bar. And then on the 31st, we've got the Installation Luncheon and Diversity Awards at the Contra Costa Country Club. And finally, on February 6th, we have the 3rd annual Lunar New Year celebration dinner. This sells out every year, and I know they're getting pretty close to sold out now, so if you want to attend, don't wait. Next, I want to thank our sponsors, one of whom is actually here tonight. So, DLCCS, DLC Consulting Services. They're sitting in back here next to Ann.
And Camacho. Hello.
And another sponsor is LawPay. So we want to thank both of those for helping to sponsor our law practice roadmap this year. So tonight, I'm up here as the moderator, and we have Mika Domingo and Kiana Washington, our primary speakers. We're very happy to have them. All three of us are actually board members for the Contra Costa Bar Association, so it kind of worked out that way. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of have them introduce themselves to give you a background on where we're coming from in this talk. And why don't you start off, Mika?
Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Mika Domingo, founder and managing partner of MS Domingo Law Group. I started my practice after law school as a deputy attorney general with the Attorney General's office, representing clients in civil rights litigation. After that, I worked in private practice before I launched my law practice.
Do we have a way to turn off the AC? Okay. We're going to have to talk really loud, apparently, over the air conditioning system.
My name is Kiana Washington. I am the founder and managing partner of Washington and Associates. It's a criminal defense and plaintiff civil rights firm in Walnut Creek. I started that firm in 2014. Prior to that, I spent 10 years as a public defender in a number of offices, starting in Contra Costa, Sonoma County, and then most recently in San Francisco.
And I'm David Pearson. I started out many years ago doing insurance defense at a law firm in the Central Valley. I did that for about 5 years. Up until October of this past year, for 23 years, I was a solo, doing primarily outside general counsel work, working out of my house. I had no employees, no staff, and no overhead, which was really nice. As of October of last year, I joined the law firm Brothers Smith as a partner, where I still practice the same kind of outside general counsel work, but now there's a whole bunch of staff and overhead and people that I work with, and I don't get to work out of my house anymore. So that's kind of the background we come from. And I was looking, how many here in the audience are solo attorneys? All right. And I know we've got a couple law students, because I recognize some of you. How many law students are out there besides? All right, we've got 3 of you. And the rest of you are in private practice or government practice?
Compound question.
It is a compound question. So do we have any government practitioners who are looking at leaving practice and going out and opening an office? All right, so that gives us a little bit of a background about our audience. And we're here, I mean, there are no real experts on these subjects. We're going to be talking about what we've done in our practices, what we've seen other people do. And hopefully you can pick up some ideas on how to run and operate your own offices from the things that we do. Because I know I've found that speaking with a lot of solos over the years, you kind of pick up how to operate from maybe your first job, and then you never change that. And speaking to other solos can give you some ideas on how potentially to do something more efficiently, or something that, hey, that's a really bright idea, I want to try that out. And I know talking with Mika and Kiana, they've got some really good ideas on running their offices, and both of them have been very successful, much more so than me. So diving into it, our first topic is on kind of budgeting and financing. If you're going to start an office, what do you kind of need to do before you make that first leap? So Kiana, how did you make that leap into being your own boss?
So it started off while I was a public defender in San Francisco, and I planned my exit from the office probably about 6 months in advance. I had savings that I amassed over time, and so I ended up using my savings plus credit cards to buy all the, to pay for all the startup expenses. And that's basically how I funded it. My father actually died 2 weeks after I started my firm, so I spent a lot of my savings just on paying for funeral expenses. So that kind of was a little bit of a curveball, but it also kind of motivated me because I needed money right away, so I couldn't really wait for the clients to come in. I kind of had to pound the pavement and get them in order to kind of keep the money rolling.
How about you, Mika?
When I was working in private practice, I was very much involved with bringing in clients for my firm. That's because of the networks I've had. I had been a finance auditor for 10 years, and I also had my own publishing firm for also about 10 years. And so those contacts, and also my mother, who was a CPA, had her own networks. Because the firm I was working for did estate planning, trust and probate litigation, and real property law, I had some of those contacts who would call me, and so I was able to refer those clients to the firm I was working for. But as I was going through that, working for another firm, I realized, I am an entrepreneur by nature. And while I was learning a lot from that firm in the same way as I learned a lot from working from the AG's office, there's really something about what was fulfilling for me as a professional. And so I thought the best way was to learn as much as I could, which I did. The practice areas were very different from the AG's office. I had a plan, as Kiana did, set a date for when I was going to resign, and research on malpractice insurance, startup costs. I had a profit and loss statement, and that's your budget, essentially your statement of your anticipated income and expenses. And I had a conversation with my husband, how are we going to make this work if I were to go solo? Are we going to be able to cover the mortgage, et cetera? And so once I had the budget, I made the announcement. I calendared everything. When was my malpractice insurance going to be in effect? When was I going to let people know that I was on my own? And went from there.
So what do you think it cost you up front to get started?
As far as numbers?
Yeah, what type of a budget did you set for yourself?
Yes, so very, very low budget because I had the opportunity to sublet from somebody who's a colleague, friend who was practicing in bankruptcy law, and he was interested in probate. So my rent for a sublet was $400. So $400 for the rent, and my insurance less than $300. I had, I think as far as startup costs, very low because I had mentors who donated computers. So your startup costs would typically include office equipment, software, et cetera. Those were all donated by my contacts, which was great. That kept the budget low. But startup, I think I had maybe $3,000 for the first month to run. And that means from day one, if this is how much I had, can I then enter into fee agreements with clients, which I did. And luckily, on the first day that I announced I was going live with this practice, I had one of my CPA colleagues who said, look, I have 9 estate planning clients that I want to hand over to you. They don't have an estate planning attorney. So I had that as a base. And as you know, when you're starting your own practice, you have to think about your fee agreements contingency versus flat rate versus hourly. So in my head, I was able to calculate if I'm able to enter into agreements with these potential clients, am I going to have enough of a base, which I did, which then gave me the confidence to say, look, you know what, I have this. But I also, as Kiana was mentioning earlier, there's a personal funds too. You want to have that contingency plan, right? What if you didn't have those clients from day one? So I did have funds that if I needed to use them, I was going to draw from those personal funds. And I didn't consider loans at all because, as I said, I was starting very low key and just trying that out as a strategy. And then I was going to stay flexible with the budget depending on what other expenses I incur.
How about you, Kiana? What kind of budget did you have to start out?
I at least maxed out one credit card, so it was about $8,000, just totally buying things like printers, computers, anything I could think of, a NAS device to store my files digitally and access them remotely. I signed up for 2 virtual offices. I kind of wanted to stay a little bit connected to San Francisco. I wasn't really sure where my clients were going to come from. And so I wanted to stay connected to San Francisco. These virtual office plans were super cheap monthly, which was very appealing. And there wasn't really much of a contractual obligation with them. So I had 2 of them, one in Walnut Creek, one in San Francisco. San Francisco was a little bit more expensive, but it was basically, I think Walnut Creek was about $250. San Francisco was just under $300 a month. Then I split, like they give you a certain number of hours that you can use the facilities. So I would basically set up a schedule, like these days in San Francisco, these days in Walnut Creek. They also answer your phones, which was very helpful because it allowed me to kind of be mobile and to also not need to pay a separate phone bill because that was included in the rent. And then, when I wasn't at those facilities, then I had a home office and worked from home. Usually that was on Fridays or whatever day that I felt like it was more advantageous to be at home. And so internet was already set up at home, so I didn't really need to deal with that. Internet was included in the virtual office plans. A lot of the virtual office plans come with a certain number of pages that you can use for copying and printing. So that was included. And then I used a Google Voice number, which was free. So that I could preserve my personal cell phone number, but it also gave me the ability to preserve those client communications because the voicemails are recorded, the text messages you get in email format, in addition to showing up on your phone. And so there were a lot of little ways where I could do things that were cheap or free. I also had a friend's wife who did graphic design and website design, and so she only charged me $400 to set up my website and do my logo design and all of that. And I ordered a bunch of swag on one of these. I think it would like Vista Print and Overnight Prints. So like there are a lot of different ways where you can do things on a budget and kind of keep it relatively low. But you want to still have access to, professional products. Like you don't really want to spend your time paying and going to copy shops to do your scanning and things like that. So, but you can get all that for relatively cheap as well, like these all-in-one printer, copier, scanner, fax machines, whatever. And I also, for fax, because you're just mobile. Like that's a good thing about being solo is you're mobile. So I signed up for a service called Smart Fax. And there was a fax number, like a receiving number that was included in my virtual office plan. But in order to send faxes, you needed something additional. And so Smart Facts actually has not gone up in price since I started my firm almost 6 years ago. So it's about $6.95 a month. So like a lot of those expenses were just really low. And that allowed me to kind of have a comfort level and still feel like I have access to the things that I need to do my job.
Great. So if anybody has questions, feel free to raise your hand. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. My background is kind of similar to Kiana in that I was at a firm and I was always a techie, so I always had all the toys at home. I didn't have to get the computers and all that stuff because it was already at my house. But when I was looking to leave, I know back then, CEB actually had a bar pass, and when you went to the CEB classes, they gave you the actual book. So you would walk out with the entire library. If you went to an estate planning class, they gave you the estate planning books. That they don't give, that now cost, what, $1,000 or something for the books?
Yeah.
So I walked out with an entire library, and I knew I was uncertain of how my income would be, and so I worked from home. And then it just became the pattern, was staying at home and working, and with the type of practice, my clients didn't visit me, so it seemed kind of a waste of money to pay somebody for an office that I wasn't going to use. But I mean, if I had Kiana's practice doing criminal defense, I probably wouldn't want my clients to visit me at times. So you kind of have to look at what your practice is, and where can you save money and where do you need to spend it, and doing it on marketing and that making you look like you're a bigger firm or more professional is definitely a good place to spend it and to put your budget. But have that budget because things can go wrong, and you want to have money in reserve. I mean, I had a wife that worked, so we had her kind of as a fallback, but we still needed 2 incomes to make the mortgage. And so, that can be scary at times when you make that leap. So you do need a cushion, whether it's your credit cards or a line of credit from the bank or just a pool of funds that you've saved up over time. But it's something you definitely need to consider as a solo because you'll see your income go up and down over time because you don't have partners to depend on. I mean, you've both of you seen that where your income at times will increase and decrease as you close out clients and haven't quite gotten a pipeline coming in.
Right. Also, in certain practice areas, for example, in probate, you could be working on a case for a year, and in one of my cases, 2.5 years, and we're not ready to close, and it's a substantial amount of money that you're expecting, so that goes in your anticipated income, but that affects your cash flow. So you're looking at what other cases you have. In my case, I do have some cases that are on an hourly basis, some of the litigation cases. So I have those in the estate planning. And it's true, some days you get a check that's pretty significant that you can say, wait, this can be sufficient to cover X number of months, salary for my paralegals for X number of months. So you want to be mindful of what you have coming in, the cash flow, and allocate accordingly. You don't get a big check and say, I'm going to buy a big, fancy car. That's not really being financially prudent. And also there are months that you're maybe not collecting. Maybe you have a case that's on a contingency basis, right? You're not collecting for 2 months. You have to keep the business running. Your operating expenses have to be paid. You have to pay your paralegals. So just keep that in mind. Some months are happy months, you can have a little extra to go do something fun, and other months you just kind of wait for when things are a little bit more, yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, in my current practice, I started out in a criminal defense practice exclusively. And so what I did to kind of get some money coming in is I joined the criminal conflicts panel. And so our criminal conflicts panel is kind of unique in Contra Costa in that you get a steady flow of cases. Other counties are a little bit different where you might only get cases once in a while. Here, there were cases coming in pretty regularly. And so that's kind of what I depended on. And they also pay monthly, which is very different from some of the other counties where I think I did some appointed cases in San Francisco where they only pay yearly. Like, so once a year, you get your payments for
That's
the whole
tough.
year.
Yeah.
So I definitely could not have lived off of that. But as I've matured in my practice, I've started doing these civil rights cases, which are a contingency, kind of like what Mika was talking about. And I mean, even now that I've been established for almost 6 years, I couldn't just do a contingency case because our case has been going for, I guess, about 9 months now, no money in the door. And so you don't want to be in a situation where you're kind of pushing your client to settle just because you have no money in the bank. And so you kind of have to have like a balance in that situation. I can imagine that would be a hard practice area, like any kind of like personal injury or civil rights stuff where you're doing things mostly on contingency would be a hard practice area to just start with. You probably would need more startup, more of a cushion to do that than if you were doing a criminal defense practice. When I first started with criminal defense, for my retained cases, it was a flat fee. So I remember, I think the first couple of cases I got, which were really great, just getting, $9,000-$10,000, like just right up front, and that's your flat fee for your case. So that was great, but when I switched to hourly, it actually was more lucrative because you get your money based on the work that you're doing, and you draw down from that monthly. And so I'm looking at the amount of money I was charging for my cases on just a flat fee basis versus what I'm charging for similar cases now. It could be 2-3 times more money just doing it on an hourly basis because I do lots of work on my cases. So these are different things that you kind of need to consider, like the different fee structures. And how that's going to impact your monthly income.
So moving on to our next topic, which is office location. So you mentioned you had kind of virtual offices, Kiana. How did you decide to do that as opposed to opening one office in a space?
It was cheaper. And you were able to, especially my San Francisco office, it was breathtaking. So it was located overlooking the Bay Bridge.
Nice.
And so you would arrive on I think it's the 11th floor, walk in, and there was this picture window, and you see the Bay Bridge right out there. And so that was great because, there would be that wow factor for the clients coming in. I think for one of my first cases, I met them originally at their home. They wanted to we want to go to your office. They wanted to make sure I had an office and take a look at it before they handed me thousands of dollars. And so, I literally saw my client's brother kind of looking around okay, this looks like, $10,000 worth of office. That kind of consideration was very important. And when you're going to be charging a high level retainer, the clients want to look at your setup and kind of see is that worth it? They kind of judge you based on your space. So obviously it was also cheaper, low commitment. I think I had to give 30 days notice if I didn't want to work there anymore. So there was no real contract, which was great because I just didn't know how things were going to go. But I was able to get high-rise suites for a little bit of nothing monthly. So that's kind of how I picked it. I also just picked location. I actually live in Richmond, which is, depending on traffic, can be 30, 40, 50-minute drive. And so people were like, well, why don't you just get an office in Richmond? People aren't going to pay the same kind of retainer if I have a Richmond office that they would pay for a Walnut Creek office. I've actually had judges ask me, where's your office? And so clearly people are judging you from about the location where your office is. So that was also very important. In the virtual office situation, I didn't have to pay for furniture either. When I moved from virtual office to a monthly lease, I went on a monthly lease. It was actually like a 3-year lease. But I had to pay $25,000 for furniture. So I could not have done that and then expected to have money left over if I had started out that way. But last year we moved to our own space because we kind of outgrew the other space. And I had to buy my own furniture. It doesn't come with furniture. And I needed to make sure it was high-end furniture. It couldn't just be like some IKEA furniture. Again, I'm asking people for, now I'm asking people for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 retainers. I need to have an office that reflects that kind of success. And that cost me $25,000 to purchase all of that furniture.
They're beautiful. I have
I'm going to move into your office. Dang. Yeah, it's more than I spent on some of the furniture in my house. So how about you, Mika? You would start out in a shared office. How did that work well?
That worked out well. I enjoyed having that shared space with a colleague and friend, but really I needed additional space once I got busy enough to justify hiring a paralegal. And so I moved into my own office about 6 months after that time that I was subletting. And then so I signed a 2-year lease, and location was in the same general area, and this is in downtown Walnut Creek. For me, location is also very important. I do a lot of work in the county, Contra Costa County, so I wanted to stay in Contra Costa. I wanted to stay in Walnut Creek because a lot of my power partners, those are your colleagues who refer clients to you, their offices are in Walnut Creek. So I thought, this would be ideal for me. And as far as commute, it's a 15-minute commute from home. So my office location is very convenient in terms of me being able to walk to the post office, walk to the banks. I have relationships with bank professionals who refer their clients to me. So I like being able to stop in during the day and say hello, and almost always somebody's going to see me and someone's going to say, hey, I gave your card to somebody. And so that was sort of my motivation, is the practical aspect of it. I needed space. I wanted to stay in Walnut Creek. But also, as my firm is growing, I needed to be available for clients that are in the San Francisco and Alameda counties. I have taken on cases in San Francisco court, and it was very difficult to have to go to San Francisco early and in the morning for hearings and then have to be in Walnut Creek, or clients who see your address and not be comfortable driving through the tunnel. They think for some reason if they're coming from San Francisco, that's too far. And so I decided to rent space in Berkeley, and that's why I have 2 offices, and the rent there tends to be lower than what I have for the Walnut Creek office because it's an executive suite. So an executive suite where you have an arrangement to have your own private space for a limited time during the week, which makes perfect sense because I'm not there every day. So I have that as an office option for those clients who are coming from San Francisco, Berkeley, and it's a block away from BART. And so in estate planning, sometimes you'll have clients who just they want to walk to you. They want to get to you, but they don't drive. And I find that when you think about what your clients need, that gives you the motivation when you're setting up your practice, when you're looking for resources. That gives you the motivation to make those changes, and keeping in mind how doing a cost benefit analysis. So with the 2 office spaces, I find that my rent is fairly reasonable, and thinking now with some clients that are from the South Bay, maybe a 3rd office is in the works. So just do your research, find out where your clients might be coming from. I speak to a lot of estate planning attorneys who say, look, you being in Walnut Creek as an estate planner makes a difference, because the clients that come to your door are clients who own properties in those areas as opposed to another city. So that, to your point about the cost and how can you justify the fees, your fees tend to be higher in certain areas. And clients sometimes do look at, what are we paying you for? Do you have coffee for them? Do you have, what is the experience with you like during your consults, especially for estate planning or even trust litigation? And I do also personal injury. And sometimes clients want to know how, do you have help? Is it you or do you have paralegals and what do they do? And sometimes it's helpful when you're doing an interview for a personal injury client and then there are two of you asking questions. That sometimes plays a factor also.
So for myself, because of my practice, my clients generally didn't come see me. I act as outside general counsel, and my clients are going to pay me to go to their offices. So they didn't care where I was located or how I worked. And only rarely did anybody ever come to my house to meet with me. It was almost always them paying me to come see them, or clients I've never seen ever or met. I just talk to them over the phone, we text, we email back and forth. So I have a lot of clients like that where there's almost no personal interaction face to face. So a lot of it comes down to your practice and what works for you, as you heard from Mika and Kiana. There are tons of options, and especially in the Bay Area, I mean, as you heard from them, they're looking at different cities to put their offices. I mean, right now it can take you a half hour just to go from Walnut Creek to Orinda at times, or longer. So think about people who are coming from Berkeley who need to come to Walnut Creek, or from Pleasanton at different times of the day. That's a huge commute. And so those, you potentially limit who your clients would be depending upon your practice area based upon where your office is. Another thing to think about, where Mika started with a shared office. When you're starting out your practice, a lot of times that's a good idea because it cuts your rent, you're saving money, and you have a potential built-in networking factor. You have other attorneys or other professionals in the office that you can share clients with, you can bounce questions off of, get help. Whereas if you're a solo working by yourself in an office, you're a little more cut off from that. So it's some other options to think of as you're looking at where do I start, where do I set my office up, and how do I grow into the future. So I know you did quite a bit of that initially because you had that networking group built in where you were able to get clients referred to you, right, Mika?
Right. So I really enjoyed having, when I was doing my budgeting, I was very liberal in terms of anticipating my income and as far as income, very conservative with budgeting my income, but liberal in terms of my expenses. But I knew that I had these clients coming in during the first few months especially, and so it was great. I enjoyed having a very low rent. Now I have an office suite there are 4 rooms, so it's a lot bigger, and therefore the rent is higher. But I also needed to think about the longer term, my vision for the firm, and having the ability to accommodate additional employees. So I signed a 5-year lease. I negotiated with the landlord, and it works out really well. So far, so good. But as you grow your practice, you'll have changes to your budget. Your office needs will change, and it can be a situation where you anticipate having space. You sign a lease for 5 years, but maybe on the 3rd year you realize, what, I don't want to have 5 employees. I like being a solo. So you have to prepare for that as well, have a contingency plan. For me, when I signed a lease agreement with my landlord, even though it was a 5-year, I had the option to terminate that agreement on the 3rd year without any penalty. So I built that in because I'm thinking, wait, in a perfect situation, the firm will keep growing, but maybe there are other considerations. Maybe I don't want to have as many employees. Maybe I'll get to that, maybe I won't, but just so that options are in place, you want to protect yourself when you sign those lease agreements.
And that goes into some of our ethics issues in your office. If you're in a shared space, you have to think about how do you keep your client files protected from, your coworker, from the people you're sharing space with. And that's a significant consideration as attorneys, because everything we're doing is confidential. So you have to consider in a shared space or in a virtual office. If you're going to one of the rental offices, you're bringing in all of your equipment. If you go in with your laptop, are your emails secured, or can somebody else who's on that same network in the virtual office access the emails that you're sending? Those are all things you need to think about and ask about if you don't know how to handle the technology, to make sure that what you're doing is protected. And potentially, your malpractice carrier is going to ask about that too, because if you're in a shared office space, you want to make sure that if another attorney in the office commits malpractice, that plaintiff who's suing that other attorney doesn't think that you are their partner because you're sharing space with them, and somehow you get dragged into that lawsuit. Then you've got to get out of the lawsuit, spend money to prove, no, we're not partners. They're on their own. We're completely separate law firms. So those are considerations depending upon what your space is. And those are, the lawsuit scenario is something that the insurance carriers actually think about. So you need to look at that too. So rolling into marketing, because this works perfectly with marketing. So you mentioned the CCP panel for helping get yourself started. How else did you market originally, and how do you market now, your practice?
Yeah, so when I first started, I didn't know anything about marketing. I was a government employee, so we didn't have to bring in business at all. In fact, business was coming, as a public defender, business was coming whether you wanted it to or not. And often you'd come back from court and like a new set of files. Like that was not an issue when I went into private practice. So, I thought, like probably most people, when you start a business, you think, okay, Google AdWords. And so I quickly realized that you can rack up a lot of money paying for Google AdWords and not necessarily getting a huge return off of that. So I stopped that pretty quickly. But then I do remember sitting kind of in those early days, sitting at my desk with no work to do and talking to one of my colleagues who had been in private practice for some time. And I was just like, how do you make the phone ring? And so he hooked me up with a referral partner who did immigration law. And so I started getting some clients that way. And then there were some other kind of connections, like family members would like have conversations and tell people about me. And then I kind of spread the word that way. But probably, I think about 3 years ago, I had heard about this organization called BNI, which is a networking organization. And so one of my sewing buddies, because I create clothing on the side, was a member, and she's a commercial real estate agent. And so she had told me about the group. I looked online because I was going through one of those periods that David was talking about. There would be times for months where no new clients would come in. Like I remember that first year, I had a completely dry summer. No, not one single new client showed up the whole summer. And so after going through that period a couple of years in a row, or 2-3 years in a row, I was like, how do I get off this train? And so I thought about this group. I think I actually met someone at a networking event for my law school, like an alumni event. She mentioned this BNI group. I remembered that the other lady had talked about it as well. So I decided to check it out, and they were pretty legit. Like they were very serious about business and making referrals and stuff like that. So I looked at my friends group, and they were a $3 million chapter. At this point, I think they're $4 or $5 million. And so I signed up and got involved in that, and I learned a ton about network marketing. I ultimately stepped back from the group because it is really time consuming. They require weekly attendance, and in my particular group, it was on Fridays. And in my practice area, we do a lot of like Friday only appearances for certain types of calendar appearances. So like that was just getting a little bit too much for me. And I kind of had to do a cost benefit analysis of that. But what I learned in the 2 years that I was a member was all about network marketing, which looking at my numbers, we track in our firm where our business comes from. Like that's part of, we have Clio, our case management software is Clio. And so it has an ability for us to put in a field for where the business came from. And so when my staff sets up like a new client, that's one of the things that we need to find out. Like, was this a referral from BNI? That's one of the choices I still have there, because sometimes I still get referrals from that group. Is this another professional that has referred me some business? Another, like a former client or current or former client. I was getting a lot of referrals from current and former clients. And then I've looked at and drawn up like a pie chart, like what percentage of my business is coming from where, what percentage of my revenue. And the vast majority of my revenue was coming from referrals. So that indicated to me that I need to put a lot of effort into building these relationships, especially, being an attorney, you want to have those relationships with other attorneys. I don't know very many criminal defense attorneys, other than the ones that I know back from my CCP days. Most of the attorneys that I know, and most, civil attorneys, they know like one criminal defense attorney, maybe two. Like they don't have a whole lot in their collection. Yet when someone gets arrested, they just call whatever lawyer they know. So they could call a probate attorney and say, hey, I have this situation. If I have a relationship with that person's going to say, well, call Kiana. Like, I can't help you with that. And so that leads to dollars and cents in the bank. So that's kind of my current marketing is all based on, and there's kind of a science to it of building these relationships, even down to something that might sound trivial in this day and age. Doing it on social media when one of your colleagues posts something on, say, LinkedIn, to like that post or to comment, great job, Mika. And so then that person feels like they want to reciprocate because you always like their post, you always share their post, so they share your post back. And that kind of raises your profile. And again, no money is spent on this. It's just all based on reciprocity with your colleagues. And then that keeps you top of mind with those colleagues, is they're like, oh, I just saw a post that Kiana did, or I saw a post that Mika did. And then they're thinking about you when they get that call for that business. They're like, oh, we'll call so-and-so. Like, she knows about that.
So you all need to go on LinkedIn tonight, look up Mika's post for the talk tonight, and go like it, because she tagged all three of us in it.
Thank you.
Tagging is very important too.
Yes.
Yep. Yes, Marta.
When do you want questions? Do you want
Whenever. If you have a question now, go ahead and ask,
Can I
Marta.
heckle you now?
Heckle us now.
So that is a problem for me because you start going on LinkedIn or Facebook and half of your day is gone just liking stuff, reading stuff. Oh, this is interesting. And like I would need to build my time and just be productive. So there is a tension there between your marketing efforts.
You don't want to spend all your time doing that. Like, you might want to, like, okay, so I have this app on my phone. It's like a networking app, and it gives you certain points for certain things. And so, sharing someone's post on social media, that's 1 point. So you don't want to spend, like, no matter how many times you do it, you only get 1 point for that. So you don't want to spend all of your time doing that. You kind of want to be selective. In terms of like, just pick one person. And I usually try to do it authentically. Like, I'm not going to like someone's post if I don't like it. And so if I think it's interesting, then I'll just reach out and say, hey, that's an interesting post, so-and-so. So you don't want to spend all of your time on something. You have to look at the cost-benefit analysis. So if you do something, what's the return on your investment? something like, say, doing a presentation. Like, we're networking right now. Like, you might not have realized it, but we're networking right now by doing this talk, right? And so this would get you more points than just, you know, a social media post or liking
what's
someone's
the
social
app?
media.
Now everybody's going to go download it.
Why not? It's
Okay.
called Networking Scorecard. I got it on, I have an Android. So I got it on Google Play.
What's the app? Everything has
So
an app.
it has like little things. Basically, it's like a digital platform where you can fill out, you know, little sheets. Like this one is send a thank you card. Sending a thank you card gets you 1 point. Sending a thank you gift gets you 5 points. One of the things I do in my networking, if someone gives me a referral, whether it closes or not, I will send them a gift. You know, I find out what they like, so I make it like a personal gift. Like, you know, for instance, Mika likes whiskey. So if Mika sent me a referral, I would send her whiskey. You know, or if like someone, like at one lady, she's given me
Scotch or-
Blue labels.
Someone sent me a referral like a few years ago. I sent her like a gift certificate for beer because someone I used to work with many years ago. And so recently she sent me another referral. Like it kind of basically it's like reinforcing them sending you referrals. So you're going to get more points for doing something that's more likely to yield something, because people, even if they don't really think about it, they'll be like, that's cool. And I've had one person say, hey, you sent me this nice bottle of, I think it was whiskey, and he's like, I feel like I should do something about that. And they feel like they should reciprocate. They should give you referrals. And even if it didn't close, they feel like, well, then I need to work harder and give you more referrals because you gave me this expensive bottle of whiskey. And so that's a way to kind of reinforce that, that is a little bit higher yield than just a social media like. I would focus more on that, just kind of maybe once a day do a social media like, but like every time, it's part of my business plan, every time, as far as I know about it. I mean, some people call and they're like, I don't know who that person was that told me to call you. So you can't really do anything about that. But if you know who the person is that referred you, I would give them a gift every time, and a personal gift if you can. I mean, you don't really want to give someone like a Starbucks gift card if they're like, I don't drink coffee. Or send them like a bottle of wine and they're like, I don't drink alcohol. So if you kind of show a little bit more interest in the person and what they like, that's going to be a higher yield result. Giving a referral is marketing too. Because people, they feel like, hey, you referred me this business. And I've had people say that. I've had people say like, well, this person referred me some business, so I want to refer them some business back. And that's worth 10 points. So, I mean, those are the types of things you have to think about. You don't want to spend all of your time on that, but you do need to focus on business development. It can't just be, oh, I spent all my time doing billable work, because if you do that, you might reach a point where you don't have any more work to bill on if you don't work on developing that business.
I'm waiting.
Yes, and back.
Have any of you on the panel gotten much business from just your website, or let's say even articles that you've published, which may or may not end up on your website as well?
So for me, all of my referrals as a business attorney come from other attorneys and CPAs, business people. It's all referral. Having a website is irrelevant. Nobody's going to look for a corporate attorney by Googling. And if they do, you might not want them as a client. So I didn't see that the website for me was all that helpful. I don't know about two
Well,
of you.
for me, as far as marketing, as you know, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to marketing. And as far as how I did the marketing in the beginning and how I do it now, they're slightly different. In the beginning, when you're first starting out, you'll know that it's helpful to let everybody know that you're practicing, you're launching your practice, and these are the practice areas. I contacted everybody I knew. So did my siblings and my cousins, and I have a large family. They told everybody, even those people who didn't know I became an attorney. And also, I belong to quite a few organizations. I have been involved for so many years, so I had a list of those companies, Ecology Center, the Cancer Association, and contacted those people I worked with over the years and told them, hey, look, I have a new practice. This is what I'm doing. Can I help you with an upcoming fundraiser? Why? Because the best way to get a client, to get a referral, is to give a referral, is to provide some help, some service to someone else. Similar approach with you sending something, right? How can I help you? I'm at a golf association. I'm with a golf association, and so my husband is also involved with that. And I attend as much as I can, not because you have to, because I love it. I go to everything if I can, and talk to people and let them know this is what you're doing. They may not need an estate planner, but they might need a criminal defense attorney. And why is that beneficial? Because you know you have someone in mind you can refer them to. Then you refer to your colleague. That colleague then in turn wants to reciprocate, right? How do you stay on top of people's mind? Well, just be sincere about it. When you go to events, when you get asked to speak, take the time to get to know who's attending. Ask them to stay connected, because there's going to be some way for you to help each other out in the future. Yesterday, I got this email from somebody I used to sing with about 35 years ago and says,
You're not even 35, so.
and emails me and says, Michelle, I go by Mika now, so she knew me as Michelle, it's my legal name. I need a special needs trust for my kid. And I thought, perfect. I don't do them. I have someone in mind who is perfect for this. Text my friend right away, who happens to be a friend, colleague, golf buddy. Even at 8 o'clock at night, I said, can I do this? Right? Can I know the limits? And so my friend said, it's really awesome to see how things have changed for you, because this was not my track. And I said, well, it's so awesome for you to keep me in mind, because we sang together. She said, you were always so much fun. That has nothing to do with my ability to practice law. The point is, people are going to remember you for who you are, right? You could be at your kid's practice, right? And you make a connection with one of the parents, and they're gonna maybe need you or need somebody that you know. It's very important. When I think of marketing, I was very frugal when it came to marketing budget. My first year, I did not want to spend a penny, because the way I thought of marketing was, look, everywhere I go, I market, because I am so involved. My husband is involved. My family is very involved. All I need to do is go to the things I already go to. And what's the difference? This time I'm telling them, hey, look, I have a business card. I am doing this. That way the connection is very sincere. You're not trying to attend an event you've never been to, but you're there because they already know you. You have an interest in that particular activity, and you tell them what you do. How can I help you? Always approach from that perspective. How can I make things easy for you, whatever it is that you're going through? Maybe it's not me, maybe it's Kiana, maybe it's David, whatever, whoever, but you have your network. And like I said, I was very frugal with marketing budget my first year. And one of my mentors from Silicon Valley, I used to do help with startup companies. Though my mentor and his friends started sending me clients for business cases, cases that I didn't really want to deal with, formation. So my first year, because I was getting those cases, I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to do this because I want to help my friends. So I ended up working on startups and doing formation and business advice, because I had done that practice area. I had some experience having worked for a private firm before I launched my own practice. So I had some experience there, but it's not my favorite, which is why I'm not doing it now. But the point is, when you're first starting out, you want to look at your network. Kiana talked about keeping track. I keep a pivot table. I know I like charts, and so I have my source of various groups that I belong to and specific key people, and whether or not I could help them or they could help me. I keep track of an appointment with them. Oh, so and so told me they need a family law attorney, and then I track that. Who among my colleagues can I send to this person? And I track that. Was this a sell or not? And just keep that as a visual aid, but also keeping in mind that your marketing strategies can change depending on the economy and depending on your practice area, and also depending on your capacity. You might be in a situation where, in a particular month, you're getting 30 estate planning requests, and maybe you don't want to do 30 this month because you have a couple of litigation cases you want to focus on. So a lot of times when I get those calls, I say, yes, I have somebody. If it's something that I know I don't have capacity for, because I always have a list of, estate planners, litigators, some real property attorneys. I've talked to Marta many times on cases where, hey, look, employment law, Marta. Marta's always been one of my power partners, and so we just keep that going. I've known her for 10 years. So you look at your circle, you look at your organizations, you look at various methods, some online presence, blogging, speaking at an event, and just having fun with it. Don't think of it as a task.
Make a pitch, the Bar Association. I'm assuming, is everybody here a member of the Contra Costa Bar Association? Is there anybody who isn't? You should join. That's an excellent way to meet people. We have tons of sections. We publish our magazine every month that attorneys in the county write for. We're always looking for authors for articles. So, one of the attorneys in the county, Nick Casper, his article that he wrote for us years ago is still the top-rated article being searched through our magazine. And the article, the original was 5 years ago, I think, and he updated it a couple years ago. But that's still our highest-rated search for our magazine. So, volunteering to write for the Contra Costa Lawyer, joining the solo section. Our current solo president, Heidi's in back. I joined the solo section and took over as president when I came up to the county from the Central Valley. And that was critical to go meet other attorneys because all of my clients come from word of mouth.
And we also have the LRIS. I belong to the estate planning panel. And during my first year, and I still do participate in that now, and it's very helpful. During my first year, some of you may know that probate cases are very hard to get. But I got my first probate cases through the LRIS, so it's very helpful. It's important to stay involved. People that I have worked with closely, I can talk to them about some issues that may arise, and I can get insights. And also, it's just really a lot of fun, even if you're a solo or a small firm, when you have a network of people that you can share ideas with. I can't tell you how many times James Wu, who's our past president, invited me to things to either speak or to just sit at a lunch with people he's worked with over the years. Just the other day, he sent me another referral to be working with somebody who is out of state, and I find that it's incredibly helpful to have this really amazing set of colleagues that you can work with and help support. Just keep in mind, you want to support them as well.
Kind of going back to that, the website issue though, I think it's important to have a website, but I did get some advice when I first started my business. One of my colleagues from San Francisco was complimenting me on my website, and I was like, well, it's not getting me any business though. And he's like, you don't want that kind of business because those are usually bargain hunters. You don't really want that kind of business. And so it's mostly just a tool for people to close the deal, basically. So you put all of your accomplishments, and I've had people, like, they got referred to me doing DUIs is kind of like there's a lot of DUI attorneys out in the market, but you know, when the clients are trying to figure out like which one should I go with, you know, they're doing some research, and your website is a source of information. And I've had clients tell me, while they didn't come to me because of the website, they looked at my website and they saw something that they liked about my accomplishments, and that made them decide to go with me over someone else. So it is important. It's just not really a good source of referrals, I would say.
And a question, yes.
Yeah, each of you describe, I guess, your biggest pleasant surprise and your biggest negative surprise when you launched into solo practice.
Biggest pleasant surprise, being my own boss. I mean, my daughter was born a few months after I became a solo, and I worked from home and raised her. I got to do all the parent stuff, going to parties and doing all the chaperoning, so that was great. The downside, if I had a bad month, I had to live on credit cards. I mean, that was scary. You know, if you have a slow month, you have to help support your family. And you know, now that I'm at a law firm, if I have a slow month, the other attorneys have a good month, so it balances out. But as a solo, it's all on you. How about you two?
For me, the biggest pleasant surprise is that I really got to focus on my work without some of having been a government attorney, there's a lot of bureaucratic stuff, let's just call it, that you have to deal with, and that was completely gone. So I was really especially as a solo, purely focused on my practice area, which I really enjoyed. The thing, I wouldn't necessarily call it a negative, but it's been kind of a struggle. Like, many people are lawyers, that's why they went to law school. They did not go to business school because business did not appeal to them. Well, when you start your own practice, you are a business person. You are not just a lawyer anymore. You are a business person. And you have to focus on business principles that maybe most likely as an attorney you have never been exposed to. You have to focus on accounting. When I was meeting with the two of them in preparation for this talk, they were talking about how with it they were with their accounting from day one. Like, I'm still working on that. I really am still working on that.
We described to her what a balance sheet and an income statement was. It's all good.
Yeah, they informed me, but like I said, it's been 6 years. But if I really had to pick a negative, I would say taxes. That's kind of the downside of success, is you start making all this money, and especially if you're like me and I'm not tracking how much money I made. I think a few years ago, or maybe even last year, I looked up at the end of the year and I'd made $400,000. And that meant Uncle Sam, he wanted a big chip of that. And it's only going up from there. And so what I had to learn is tax planning strategies. These are things that I never had to learn as a government employee, and no one had ever talked to me about them. I had no information about this, and all of a sudden I'm in a completely different realm, and I have to cope with things that I've never dealt with before. So that's kind of negative.
How about you, Mika?
Biggest pleasant surprise, I would say taking on a very complicated case on my own, and with some assistance from a contract attorney my first year, a case that was in San Francisco court, Superior Court, and I had 8 attorneys opposing counsel. And so that was a pleasant surprise, because when you go to a mediation and it's you and your client, and then it's the other side with 6 attorneys, initially you get that sort of, oh my gosh, should I have invited, just even from just the looks of it, right? It's you on this side and all these attorneys on this other side. But then I remembered my training from the AG's office, and a lot of times we had to deal with cases where it's us and there's more on the other side. And I remember my supervisor who said, look, if you get past, what you're seeing and just remind yourself how well prepared you are, if you are, of course, you're going to be well prepared, and focus on that, you'll be fine. Take a deep breath. It's almost like when you're taking that golf swing, right? You focus on one at a time, one item at a time. And it was an amazing experience, because even though I was very nervous in the beginning, I had to remind myself not to appear nervous, because it was going to affect how they perceive me and how they ask questions. And it had nothing to do with ability, whether you have one attorney versus 8. I was well prepared, and I knew that. So that was pleasant. And as I continue with my practice, I take on more and more challenging cases. I do rely on not just my training and background, but also my colleagues who are very much versed in a lot of these cases. Sometimes I just have more conversations with them before I take on a complicated case. And it's surprising, because sometimes I get a call from someone who says, look, I have a complicated case. Can you help me with this? So that's also very surprising sometimes. As far as the negative, I think one of the biggest negative for me is not being able to give limits to my appointments. I'm very generous with my time. I do a half an hour free consult. A lot of times a client sits there and starts talking, and I know I have my client intake. I lose track of time. If I know I don't have a back-to-back, I let the client have that conversation with me. I want to stay engaged. And then it's 2 hours later. Nobody has knocked on my door to tell me, look, it's 2 hours. So now we have this new policy where, look, 30 minutes, let me know, because we need to move on. The other...
So you have your phone ring. Oh, sorry, I've got to go.
Yeah, I do have that knock. And the other thing is, when you're first starting out, your hours. So I was so used to working from 8 to 6, and then including Saturdays, that I told my clients, look, I'm around on Saturday if you want to call me. And the clients did. So it really interrupted time with my family. I did that my first year because I didn't know how to manage as well. So I find that that's been a negative. When you tell your clients you can call me at 8 or 9, they will call you at 8 or 9. So
You need to set boundaries.
you have to set boundaries, and if you suddenly change that schedule, they'll say, I used to be able to call you at 8 p.m. What happened? Are you not as focused on my case? So you wanna respect your time, and you want to communicate that with your clients.
All right, so quickly on insurance, and when the three of us met to go over what we were going to discuss, kind of the common theme for solos, and I've seen this over the last 23 years as a solo, most solos are married to somebody who provides health insurance. Health insurance in the United States is ridiculously expensive, and if you're self-employed, you don't get to deduct that health insurance, whereas if you're an employee, you do get to your employer gets to deduct that cost.
You don't get to deduct it?
No.
As a business expense, I had read
No.
something.
If you are the owner, you are self-employed, you cannot deduct your own insurance expense. You can deduct it for your employees, but not for yourself. So most solos that I've met have a spouse who works, who provides their health insurance. I know I did. It would have been very difficult for me to go out and purchase insurance on my own to cover my family. My wife worked as a teacher at St. Mary's College. She was in the IT department. She provided our health insurance. So as you're budgeting, that's a big concern to look at. Yes?
Just to give a data point, for me, it's $750 a month,
Yeah.
just for me.
But does that include your deductibles?
Well, no.
So if
Yeah,
you
good
factor
point.
everything in, what my wife was getting from her employer that we were buying with pre-tax dollars for myself and my daughter, when I priced it out, if I was to buy her policy, which was a Cadillac policy from St. Mary's College, it probably would have cost me about $60,000 all in before taxes. So I would have had to have earned a lot of money just to cover insurance for myself, my wife, and our daughter. So when you're looking at that solo jump and budgeting, that's a big concern. You've got your malpractice insurance and that's budgetable, But health insurance is a big cost, especially, as you get older, you're going to use that insurance more and more. Or if you've got a kid who gets hurt or gets sick, it's a big factor. So it's something you do need to budget for and consider.
So for me, I was single. Like there was no spouse to do anything. not to help pay for the expenses, not to help pay for insurance, not to help do anything.
It's a poor reason to get married.
So I had to. I mean, luckily because of the changes in the law that happened just before that. But briefly, I went into private practice before I went to the San Francisco Public Defender's Office, and I was 20 or maybe 30 something, early 30s. At the time, and I think I was actually 30, and I got declined just because I had asthma. And so with the change that happened in the law about the pre-existing conditions, I was able to get insurance. With having employees, you can get group coverage, and that's what I'm getting now is group coverage. But that kind of creates some challenges too, because when I had all of my employees eventually left toward the end of last year. I was like, does that mean I'm going to lose my health insurance? Luckily, I didn't. I don't know why they just didn't kick me off, even though it was a group plan. But there are options now that if it really had been 7-8 years ago, I probably just wouldn't have done it. I wasn't going to go without health insurance.
Yeah, so that's a big concern. So we're just about out of time. One final thing we wanted to touch on was kind of an introduction to staffing, and one of the future presentations is actually James Wu is modifying it. He's last year's president for the Contra Costa Bar, and he's an employment attorney. So they're going to go very into depth in that. But just real quickly, do the two of you have staff or employees?
Yes, I have staff now. Staff was essential for me being able to, I kind of reached a point where I had so much work that just one person couldn't do that work, and I was concerned that that the quality of my work was going to suffer because there's just only so much time in the day. So I hired 2 employees. That's kind of actually where I got to the $400,000 range. My income increased substantially by having staff, which I don't think that people think about it because they're like, well, I have to pay these people, and so that's money out of my pocket. But that's actually more money back into your pocket because they're doing work that you can't do because you're off doing some other work. And so you're actually increasing your productivity. Where I see people kind of, in my opinion, get it wrong is they, as a solo, think I should just do everything. Like they should be the IT person, they should be the accounting person, they should be wear every hat. Well, not all of those hats, especially in the legal profession, those hats don't pay you anything. So if you're doing your own IT work or you're doing your own accounting and you think you're saving money, you're actually wasting money. Because especially if you're in an hourly situation, like if you make $500 an hour, normally billing, but you spend that same hour doing IT work that you're not getting paid for, you just spent $500 an hour on IT work. And it doesn't feel like you did that because it didn't come out of your pocket. You didn't pay anybody $500 an hour, but you just lost that $500 that you could have made. And so, a lot of times, this one guy said to me, penny wise and pound foolish. And that really stuck with me. Like, pay somebody to do the things that you think, well, that's just money out of my pocket, overhead. No, that frees you up to do your billable work. And so if you pay somebody $25 an hour to do something and you're bringing in $500 an hour, that's a net $475 as opposed to the $500 that you just lost out on by doing it yourself.
How about you, Mika?
Yes,
Do you have people?
I do have people now. My first 2 years, I didn't have a paralegal until the 3rd month, and I had a part-time paralegal. And because of the caseload, I had to work with contract attorneys, co-counsels. So I had 3 that I've worked with, and I'm still to this day, I work with two of them on a co-counsel basis, and I have 3 people now that are working with me, and it is tremendous help, especially when you can find the right person. That's a topic for another day, but once you do have, especially my paralegal that I work with now is incredible. In fact, she had her obtained her certificate here at JFK and is in law school, and hoping that, and she does say, that she wants to be an associate. So we're preparing for that time, and so I have 3 now, and I'm looking maybe to, as I expand, hire more people.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming tonight. Hopefully this was helpful for you. We'll all be available afterwards for a little bit if you have any more questions. Otherwise, thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you. Yeah, we went over everything. The last ones were,
Legal research was relevant anyway. But
yeah, like the legal research is like, what software to use.
Yeah, how much does it cost? That's an expense.